My daughter erased me from her life for 7 years, acted like I never existed. At 56, I left home and rebuilt everything from scratch. A boat, a marina, a life she knew nothing about. Then my brother posted a photo of my yacht online. 23 days later, my phone rang with the number I'd always feared. "Dad, it's me. We need to talk. Urgent." I stared at the screen, wondering what her plan was this time. "I'm grateful you're here. Before we begin, drop a comment and tell me where are you watching from, and have you ever been betrayed by someone you loved? Your story might help someone else. And please note this narrative includes fictionalized elements crafted for reflection and learning. Any similarities to names or places are coincidental, but the lessons I hope to share may resonate with your own journey. My name is Robert Callahan, and I'm 64 years old. 7 years ago, my daughter told me I was worthless and ordered me out of my own life, but when my brother posted a photo of me on my boat last month, she came crawling back not to apologize but to demand money she thought I owed her. Let me take you back to where it all started. To the night I learned that blood doesn't always mean family, and sometimes the people who should love you most are the ones who break you cleanest. It was an evening in the fall of 2017. I was 56 years old, sitting at a kitchen table that had belonged to my late wife, Sarah. This was her house, the home she'd dreamed of filling with grandchildren and Sunday dinners. Instead, it held 3 adults who could barely stand to breathe the same air. My daughter Ashley and her husband Connor had moved in with me 6 months earlier while they launched their startup. They needed to save money, they said, just temporarily. I told myself it was a chance to be close to her again, to rebuild something we'd lost after Sarah died. The folder sat in my lap, my hands damp against the manila paper. Inside were documents from a real estate agent, an appraisal, market comparisons. I'd overheard them 2 nights before, talking about a house they wanted to buy. They were $50,000 short on the down payment. I had a way to fix that. This house was appraised at $185,000. After the mortgage and fees, I could give them what they needed, and still have enough left to rent a small place for myself. She was my daughter. This was what fathers did. Ashley sat across from me, her laptop open, typing aggressively. Connor was beside her, scrolling through his phone. Neither had asked about my day. Neither of them ever did. I cleared my throat. Ashley looked up with the expression of someone interrupted during important work. "I wanted to talk to you both about something I started. I know you've been looking at houses, and I know the down payment is challenging." I pulled out the folder and set it on the table. "I've been thinking. This house is too big for just me. It's appraised at $185,000. After the mortgage and closing costs, I could give you $50,000 toward your down payment." The silence that followed wasn't the grateful kind. Ashley stared at the papers, then at me, then laughed. It wasn't a warm sound. "Want $50,000? She repeated slowly, like explaining something to a child. From this place, Connor leaned back, arms crossed. "Dad, with all due respect, 50 grand is pocket change for what we're building. We're talking real business here, not..." He gestured vaguely at the modest kitchen, the dated cabinets, the linoleum floor that Sarah had always meant to replace. "See, the house is worth more than you think," I said defensively. "The appraisal is right there." We need real money," Connor interrupted. "Not whatever scraps you can pull together from selling a house that should have been updated 20 years ago." I felt something cold settle in my chest. Ashley closed the folder without looking at the numbers. She pushed it back across the table. "Dad." She said it the way you'd say the name of a dog that had made a mess. "Look at yourself. Really look. What do you contribute here? You make what, $16 an hour at that maintenance job. That's barely enough to cover groceries. You're taking up space in a house that's way too small for 3 adults. Connor needs a real office, not a corner of the bedroom. This whole situation is..." She paused, searching for the right word. "It's a burden," she finished. You're a burden. Either move your stuff into the garage and stay out of our way, or honestly find somewhere else to fend for yourself. Stop dragging us down. The words hit like physical blows. I opened my mouth to respond, but nothing came out. Connor stood up his chair, scraping. He reached out and pressed his hand against my shoulder. Not a comforting gesture, a dismissive one, a push. "Come on, old man," he said flatly. "We have actual work to do." I stumbled back, my hip catching the counter. The folder slipped from my hands. Papers scattered across the floor. Ashley swept her arm across the table and my coffee mug went flying. It shattered beside my reading glasses. Those glasses. Sarah had given them to me for my last birthday before the cancer took her. She'd had them specially made with thin gold frames because she said they made me look distinguished. I'd worn them every day for 3 years. Now they lay in pieces on the kitchen floor. One lens cracked straight through the frame, bent beyond repair. Ashley and Connor walked past me, stepping over the papers, heading toward the bedroom. I heard their door close. A moment later, I heard laughter. They were laughing. I stood there for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Then I got down on my knees and started picking up the pieces. The shards of my coffee mug, the broken frames, the scattered papers that represented every hope I'd had of helping my daughter. My hands were shaking. The house Sarah had loved felt like a tomb. I gathered the pieces, carefully putting the ruined glasses in my pocket. I'd worn them to see my daughter clearly. How ironic that they'd broken the same night I finally did see her clearly. By the time I stood up, my knees creaking, my hands still trembling, I'd made a decision. It settled over me with the weight of something final and true. I wouldn't be there when the sun came up. The house was dark when I loaded the truck at 4 a.m. 30 years of maintenance work had taught me to pack light. One duffel bag held everything that mattered. Work clothes, toiletries, and a framed photo of Sarah on our wedding day. Her ring hung on a chain around my neck, cold against my chest. Everything else could stay. The furniture we'd bought piece by piece. Her books. The tools I'd used to fix things for neighbors who'd stopped calling after she died. All of it belonged to a life I was walking away from. I left a note on the counter, weighted down with her favorite coffee mug, the one Ashley had given her, that said, "World's best mom. Sold the house. You won't be burdened anymore. Dad." I didn't write love, because that felt like a lie we'd already stopped telling each other. The truck started on the second try. In the rearview mirror, the house was just a dark shape shrinking into November cold. Sarah's house. Ashley's childhood home. A place that had decided it didn't want me anymore. The sale happened fast. I'd listed with an investor who specialized in cash deals. He'd offered $180,000, $5,000 below appraisal, but I'd taken it. Speed mattered more than fairness. After the $78,000 mortgage and $14,000 in closing costs, the wire transfer came to exactly $88,000. More money than I'd ever held at once. Also, everything I had left in the world. Crescent Harbor emerged from morning fog like a postcard. Spanish moss hung from live oaks along the waterfront. Boats bobbed in calm water, reflecting pink-orange sunrise. The air smelled like salt and diesel and low tide. I'd chosen this place because Edward had mentioned it once, years ago. He'd said it was good for people who loved boats, but couldn't afford to own one yet. I found a weekly motel 2 blocks off the marina. $280 a week, cash, no questions. The room had a sagging mattress, a hot plate, and wallpaper peeling near the ceiling. It would do. Edward called on my 5th day. We'd been doing these weekly calls for years, ever since Sarah's funeral, when most people stopped checking in, but Edward kept asking if I was okay. He was my younger brother by 4 years. The only person from my old life I'd kept contact with, after Ashley made her position clear. "Still breathing?" he asked. Our usual opening, still breathing, a pause. Then his voice changed, became heavier, tighter. "Listen, I need to tell you something. I'm in trouble." Business deal went south. Real bad. I need $58,000 by tomorrow morning or I lose my boat. It's collateral on a loan I took for a charter expansion that fell through. You're the only person I trust enough to ask. I pulled over. I'd been driving past the marina heading back from a failed job inquiry. $58,000 out of $88,000. That would leave me with 30,000. 30,000 to start over in a town where I knew nobody and had no job. Robert, you there? Yeah, I'm here. I wouldn't ask if it wasn't desperate. You know that. But you're family. You're all I've got left. His voice cracked on the last word. Edward never cried. Not even at Sarah's funeral. I pulled up my banking app, stared at the number. $88,000. My hands were shaking. I thought about Ashley. How she'd laughed when I offered her $50,000 from this same house. How she'd called me a burden. And here was Edward, actually asking. Not demanding, not laughing. Just asking his older brother for help the way family is supposed to. I sat there for 2 hours. Watched boats come and go. Watched my future narrow to a single choice. Finally, I opened the wire transfer screen. Entered Edward's routing number. Entered the amount. $58,000. My finger hovered over confirm. This was nearly everything. If he lost it, I'd be broke in a town where I knew nobody. 56 years old with $30,000 and no backup plan. No safety net. No second chances. But he was family. The only person who'd stood by me when Sarah died. The only one who hadn't walked away. Family first. That's what Sarah used to say. I closed my eyes, pressed confirm. Transfer initiated. New balance $30,000. The next morning, I walked the marina docks at dawn. A man about my age was hosing down a fishing charter deck. I stopped at the edge of his dock. You hiring? He looked up, studied me. You know boats. I'd never worked a day on the water in my life. But I needed this job more than I needed honesty. Yes. He watched me for 3 long seconds. Then he tossed the hose. I caught it without thinking. 16 an hour, start now, name's Ray. I nodded. Started spraying the deck like I'd been doing it my whole life. I had $30,000. A brother who'd just taken nearly everything I had left. A job I'd lied my way into. And if any of this fell apart, I had nowhere left to fall. The water kept running. I kept spraying. And I didn't let my hands shake. They say the first year after losing everything is the hardest. They're not wrong. At 56, I learned what it meant to start over in a place where nobody knew my name. There were moments during that first year when mysterious help appeared. A cash envelope slipped under my door. A rent payment made by anonymous church charity. I didn't question it. I was too desperate. Looking back, I should have known someone was watching over me. November bled into December, then January. The weekly motel became my entire world outside the marina. Thin walls that let through every argument. A shared ice machine that rattled like a diesel engine at 2 in the morning. A window overlooking the parking lot and a neon vacancy sign that buzzed and flickered every night. I worked sunrise to sunset at the docks. Ray didn't coddle me. When I tied a cleat hitch wrong, he untied it without a word and redid it in front of me. When I stacked crates unevenly and they tipped during a swell, he made me restack them 3 times until I understood that balance wasn't a suggestion. My hands blistered, then calloused. My back ached in ways I didn't know were possible. I ate gas station sandwiches for dinner and calculated my money every night on old receipts. The $30,000 I'd started with was draining fast. $1,120 for the weekly motel. Another $400 for food and the bus pass. By March, I was down to $29,400. I did the math on a paper napkin one night and felt my stomach drop. At this rate, I'd be broke in 18 months. April brought a break. I found an efficiency apartment for $850 a month. 1 room with a hot plate, A shared bathroom down the hall. No air conditioning. When Gulf summer hit in June, the heat turned that room into an oven. I bought a rusted bicycle for $120 and started riding it to the marina. I saved $500 a month by eating cheaper. Ramen, canned soup, day-old bread from the discount rack. The money stopped bleeding. Ray noticed I was showing up earlier, staying later, asking fewer questions and making fewer mistakes. In August, he called me into his cramped office. "Dock supervisor position's opening up. 21 an hour. You want it, I stared at him. He finally met my eyes. "You've earned it." My paychecks jumped to $2,800 take-home after taxes. For the first time since I'd left Millbrook, my savings account stabilized. By late August, I had $32,500. I wasn't drowning anymore. I was treading water. October broke me. I was hauling a heavy crate when my foot hit a wet patch of algae-slick wood. The world tilted. I went down hard, and my ankle rolled beneath me with a sound I'll never forget. A wet pop, like a branch snapping underwater. X-ray wrap crutches. $765 I didn't have. The doctor told me to stay off it for 3 weeks. No work meant no paycheck. I had no health insurance, yet Ray's plan didn't kick in until 6 months, and I was 2 weeks short. When rent came due, I had $800 in my account, and a 5-day eviction notice slipped under my door by Margaret Hayes, my landlord. "Rent's overdue. Pay within 5 days or vacate." I sat on the floor, my throbbing ankle propped on a folded towel, staring at the notice in one hand and my phone in the other. I scrolled to the deleted contacts folder. Ashley's number was still there. 48 hours left before it disappeared forever. My finger hovered over her name. I could call, I could beg. She'd probably laugh, but maybe she'd send something. My hand shook. Tears ran hot down my face, the first I'd let myself cry since the night I left Millbrook. I whispered to the empty room to Sarah's memory. I won't give her that satisfaction. I won't let her know she beat me. I pressed delete permanently. Watched her number vanish pixel by pixel. On the 4th day, I hobbled on crutches to Ray's office, ready to ask for a loan. I couldn't bring myself to call Edward. He'd already trusted me with everything. I'd rather beg a stranger. But when I got back to my apartment that evening, there was an envelope under my door. No name, no return address. $850 in cash. Exactly my rent. The next morning, Father Frank Morrison from the small church 2 blocks over knocked on my door. "Someone made an anonymous donation to help neighbors in hardship. We heard you were hurt. Please accept this." I didn't ask questions. I took it. The church covered the next month's rent too while my ankle healed. By December, I was back at work full-time. My ankle was weaker stiff in the mornings, but it held. My savings crept back up to $31,200. I never found out who sent that envelope. Part of me didn't want to know. Spring came slow and warm. One evening in late April, I was sitting on the edge of the dock after my shift, watching pelicans dive for fish in the amber light. Ray appeared with 2 beers, handed me one without a word, and sat down beside me. We didn't talk for 10 minutes. Then he said, "You've been doing good work, real good. Keep it up." That night, for the first time in 12 months, I fell asleep without the chest-tightening fear that I'd wake up with nothing. I still didn't have much, but I had a name people knew at the marina. I had Ray's quiet respect. I had a weak ankle and $31,000, and a roof that didn't leak. And I had the knowledge that I'd been on the edge of the void and chosen to step back instead of jump. That was enough. For now, it was enough. In my 2nd year at Crescent Harbor, I made a mistake that would have destroyed me if it had happened a year earlier. I bought a boat I couldn't afford to fix, lost $10,000 I had no right to lose, and learned more from that failure than from any success I'd ever had. If I'd known that broken boat would teach me everything I needed to recognize a real diamond in the rough 5 years later, Maybe I would have been grateful for the lesson sooner. By mid-July of that second year, I'd been dock supervisor for nearly a year. My paycheck was steady at $21 an hour. I had $31,200 in my account. For the first time since leaving Millbrook, I felt something dangerous. Confidence. I started thinking about building something instead of just surviving. That's when I saw the boat. It was sitting in a dusty lot 3 blocks from the marina, surrounded by sun-bleached "for sale" signs. A 26-foot cabin cruiser with faded blue trim and a hand-painted sign priced to move, $18,000. In my head, the math was simple. Buy it for $18. Fix it up for $3,000 or $4,000. Sell it for $28. Easy $10,000 profit. The seller was a man in his 50s wearing a faded Hawaiian shirt and a smile that showed too many teeth. He pointed out what he called minor cosmetic issues, while assuring me the bones were solid. Engine turns over, hull's sound, just needs some love. I asked if I could take it for a test run. He said the engine wasn't starting at the moment, fuel pump issue, easy fix, but he'd knock $500 off if I took it as is. That evening at the marina, I mentioned it to Ray. He stopped hosing the deck when I told him the price. You hire a marine surveyor yet? I hesitated. A surveyor would cost $400. That was $400 less profit. I've been working with boats for 2 years now. I can spot problems. Ray looked at me for a long moment. Then he went back to hosing. Your money, he said. I bought the boat the next day. Paid $18,000 in cash. Nearly everything I'd saved since the injury. 2 weeks later, I had the boat on blocks in the marina's dry storage area. I started the repairs. That's when everything fell apart. The engine didn't just need a fuel pump. The block was cracked, a spiderweb fracture I'd missed in the dim light. When I pressed on the hull near the waterline, my thumb went through the gel coat into soft, rotted wood. Water had been seeping in for years. The electrical system was corroded so badly that half the wiring crumbled in my hands. I got repair quotes, $9,000 minimum. I had $5,000 left in my account. For 2 months, I tried to fix it myself. I watched YouTube videos on hull repair. I bought epoxy and fiberglass mat and marine-grade wire. I drilled in the wrong places. I used the wrong adhesive. I made everything worse. By October, I was sitting inside the hull water, dripping through a patch I'd botched, $3,000 poorer in wrong parts and failed attempts. I did the math. $18,000 purchase, $3,000 in parts. If I sold it now as is, maybe I could get $11,000, $10,000 loss. I sat down on the wet deck and put my head in my hands. Sarah would be so disappointed in me. I whispered to nobody. I posted the ad the next day. Boat for sale, as is, $11,000. A buyer showed up within a week. He offered 10. I countered with 11. He shrugged and pulled out a checkbook. I watched him hook it up to his truck and tow it down the marina road until it disappeared around the corner. Then I sat in my truck and stared at the check. $11,000. I'd put in 21, lost 10,000 in 4 months. Edward called that evening, Sunday check-in. Still breathing, I told him about the boat, about the loss, about how stupid I'd been. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "Expensive lessons are still lessons, brother. What did you learn?" I didn't have an answer yet. That night, I drove to the Crescent Harbor Library. I checked out every book they had on marine mechanics, hull construction, engine diagnostics, boat surveying. I filled a notebook with drawings and notes about everything I should have known before I signed that title. I stayed until closing. When I walked out, I had 9 books in a canvas bag and a determination harder than anything I'd felt since leaving Millbrook. I would never be fooled again. If I was going to survive in this world, I had to become an expert. Not someone who thought he knew enough, someone who actually did. The moment that broke me wasn't signing the check or watching the buyer tow the boat away. It was sitting in that rotted hull with water dripping onto my boots doing math I didn't want to do, realizing I'd lost $10,000 because I'd been too proud to spend $400 on a surveyor. I thought about calling Ashley, imagined her laughing when she heard. I didn't call. Instead, I drove to the library. If failure was going to teach me something, I was going to be the best student it ever had. I thought I'd left Ashley and Connor in Millbrook when I drove away 3 years ago. Turns out you can't outrun people who are determined to pull you down even from 800 miles away. What I didn't know yet was this wouldn't be the last time they reached across those miles to hurt me. And next time they'd aim lower. By late May of my 3rd year, I'd been promoted to operations manager at the marina. Ray had recommended me when the previous manager retired. $24 an hour. A small office with a desk and a filing cabinet. Real responsibility. I was 58 years old and finally building something that felt solid. That's when Trevor Ashford walked into the marina looking for someone to manage his private dock. He owned a 42-foot yacht and a waterfront estate 3 miles up the coast. He needed fuel management, weekly cleaning, maintenance scheduling. 6-month contract, $28,000. We talked for an hour. I showed him my notebook from the library, the one I'd filled after the boat disaster, and explained hull integrity, engine diagnostics, proper winterization. He was impressed. We shook hands. I signed the contract that afternoon. I hired 2 part-time workers the next day. Paul and Maria, both in their early 20s, both looking for steady hours. $12 an hour, 20 hours a week each. They were good kids. Eager. I bought supplies up front, $1,200 from my own account. I'd recoup it from the first payment. For the first time since the boat mistake, I felt momentum. 4 weeks in, I showed up at Trevor's dock for the weekly inspection. The gate code didn't work. I tried it 3 times. Nothing. I called Trevor's number. Voicemail. Full inbox. I checked my email on my phone standing there in the parking lot. 1 new message from Trevor. No subject line. Contract terminated effective immediately. No further services needed. Final payment for work completed will be mailed. That was it. No explanation, no phone call, no warning. Paul and Maria arrived 10 minutes later. They saw my face. "What's wrong?" Paul asked. I couldn't look at them. "I have to let you both go. I'm sorry." Ray suggested I call Stephen Carlson, a lawyer friend, who sometimes advised marina clients on contract disputes. Stephen met me at a coffee shop that afternoon. He reviewed the contract. Cancellation clause is legal. Trevor's within his rights, but the timing's suspicious. Let me make some calls. 2 days later, Stephen called me back. Found something. 3 days before Trevor canceled, someone called him. Anonymous. Claimed you had a history of negligence. Said you'd been involved in lawsuits. Suggested hiring you was a liability. My stomach dropped. That's not... I've never been sued. That's a lie. Stephen's voice was calm. I know. I checked. But here's the interesting part. I got the phone records through a contact. The call came from a business line registered to Thorne Logistics Solutions. Millbrook, Virginia. Mean anything to you? Connor's company. My son-in-law's company. 800 miles away. Stephen spread the phone records on my kitchen table. I stared at the company name. Connor's name. The pieces fell into place like a puzzle I didn't want to solve. They'd been tracking me. Somehow word had gotten out that Robert Callahan was managing docks in Crescent Harbor. Maybe someone mentioned it online. Maybe a mutual contact from Millbrook had seen my name. However they'd found me, they'd reached out to destroy what I was building. 3 years later, 800 miles away, and they were still trying to bury me. I wrote the final checks to Paul and Maria that evening. $960 total. Nearly emptied my checking account. I handed them the checks and tried to explain without explaining. The contract fell through. It wasn't your fault. You both did great work." Paul nodded, tried to smile. "It's okay, Mr. Callahan. We know you tried." Maria's face was harder to read. Disappointment, but understanding. They left. I sat alone in the office after dark and called Edward. "Still breathing?" he asked. "They found me," I said. "Ashley and Connor. They called my client, lied about me, killed the contract." Silence. Then Edward's voice, steady and low. "Then don't let them find them again. No social media. Work quiet. Build careful. Let them think you're not worth watching." That night, I sat in my efficiency apartment with Stephen's phone records spread on the tiny kitchen table. Connor's company name stared back at me. 3 years, 800 miles, and they were still reaching out to hurt me. I picked up my phone and opened Facebook, an account I barely used, maybe 3 posts in the last year. I deleted it. Then the rest of my online presence. Then every digital trace I could think of. If they wanted to track me, they'd have to work harder, and I'd make sure there was nothing to see. The moment that broke me wasn't the email from Trevor or the canceled contract. It was sitting across from Paul and Maria, 2 kids who'd counted on the work I'd promised, and telling them I couldn't keep my word. The checks in their hands representing money I didn't have to spare. I'd failed them because someone 800 miles away had poisoned a deal with lies. After they left, I sat alone in that empty office and put my head in my hands. Stephen's words echoed. "The call came from your son-in-law's office. 3 years of distance. 3 years of silence." And it hadn't been enough. They wanted me to fail. They wanted me gone. And for the first time since leaving Millbrook, I understood that running wasn't enough. I had to disappear. After that sabotage, I made myself invisible. No photos, no posts, no trace. And in that deliberate silence, something unexpected happened. I stopped just surviving and started actually building a life. Edward kept hinting about business connections that could bring me opportunities. I always said no. I wanted to earn it myself. What I didn't know was that some of those opportunities had been quietly arranged all along. The promotion came in early 2024, months after I deleted everything. Fleet Operations Manager. $58,000 a year, a real salary. Not hourly anymore. Mr. Grayson called me into his office, a small room that smelled like cigar smoke and old wood, and told me the marina had never run smoother. "Revenue's up, complaints are down, and the charter crews actually respect you," he said. "You've earned this." I moved to a better apartment the following week. 1 bedroom. Full kitchen with a stove that had 4 working burners. $1,100 a month, which felt extravagant after the efficiency place, but I could afford it now. I bought used furniture from estate sales. A worn couch, a solid table, nothing fancy. I created small rituals. Coffee on the balcony at sunset, where I could see the marina lights flickering on as the sky turned purple and orange over the Gulf. I started saving $1,400 a month. By the end of that year, I had $47,000 in my account. More than I'd ever saved in my life. 2021 was steadier. I stopped thinking about Ashley and Connor every day. Some weeks I didn't think about them at all. The work absorbed me. I reorganized maintenance schedules, negotiated fuel contracts, and earned the respect of the charter crews who'd been skeptical of me at first. The old salts who'd worked the Gulf for 40 years started nodding when I walked past. That meant something. In the spring, Mr. Grayson pulled me aside after a staff meeting. "Robert, you've changed this place. Revenue's up 18% since you took over operations. I want you to know I've noticed." It was the first time since leaving Millbrook that someone had told me I was good at something that mattered. I smiled. A small one. Real. My savings hit $56,000 by April. That June, I turned 60. No card from Ashley. I hadn't expected one, but the absence still stung in a way I didn't want to admit. Edward sent a gift, a nice watch with an inscription on the back, "Still breathing, E." I wore it every day after that. Ray showed up at the marina after my shift with a six-pack of beer. He knew it was my birthday, but didn't make a thing of it. We drank on the dock, watching the sun sink into the water, saying maybe 10 words total. That was Ray. When he left, I went back to my apartment and sat on the floor, not on the couch, but the floor with a grocery store cupcake and a single candle. I put Edward's watch on my wrist, leaned Sarah's photo against the beer bottle, closed my eyes and made a wish. I wish I knew if I was doing this right, if you'd be proud of me, if any of this means anything. I blew out the candle, sat in the dark, listening to the distant sounds of the marina. Let myself cry for 5 minutes. Then I stopped, wiped my face, went to bed. That was how I spent my 60th birthday. Late the following winter, I walked the docks before my shift. It was a ritual I'd built: dawn walks to check the boats, watch the light change, think. That morning, I saw a flyer pinned to the marina bulletin board. 42-foot motor yacht, salvage, $62,000. The photo showed a neglected boat with faded paint and a name barely visible on the stern, Second Chance. I stared at that name for a long time. Something stirred in my chest. Not hope exactly, but interest. I took a photo with my phone and saved it to a folder I named Maybe. The moment that broke me wasn't the birthday or the loneliness. It was the realization, sitting on that apartment floor with a grocery store cupcake and a candle, that this was my life now, 60 years old. No family except Edward on the phone once a week, and Ray's silent companionship over beer. I thought about Sarah, about what she would say if she could see me. Would she be proud that I'd survived, or disappointed that I'd built a life so small and solitary I didn't know? The candle flame wavered in the dark. I could hear the marina in the distance, the creak of boats, the hum of generators, the slap of water against pilings, sounds that had become home. I blew out the candle and sat there in the silence. 5 minutes of crying. Then I stood up, washed my face, and went to bed. Because that's what you do. You keep going. Even when no one's watching. Especially when no one's watching. By the time I turned 61 the following spring, I had $56,000 in savings, a job I was genuinely good at, and a phone that rang exactly 3 times on my birthday. Edward Ray, and an automated call about my car's extended warranty. It wasn't the life I'd imagined at 56, but I'd built it with my own hands, and no one could take it from me. At least that's what I thought. 3 months after I turned 61, my brother told me something I never expected. He wasn't the struggling boat mechanic I'd thought he was. He owned $340 million, and that $58,000 I'd given him 5 years ago. He really needed it back then. But when I gave him almost everything I had without hesitation, it showed him who I was. The day Edward handed me the keys to my own marina, he also told me something I'll always remember. It's been over 5 years since you left Millbrook. Your daughter never called, never asked. You gave me almost everything you had within days of knowing I needed it. That's the difference between bloodline and character. Edward sent a text message in mid-January. Dinner Friday. My treat. Harborview room. I showed up uncomfortable. I only owned work coveralls and one decent shirt, a button-down I'd bought at Goodwill 3 years ago. The restaurant was the kind of place where they folded your napkin if you went to the bathroom. I felt like an imposter. Edward was waiting. Suit, tie, polished shoes. He ordered wine I couldn't pronounce and made small talk about the weather, the marina, how business was. Then he set down his glass. Brother, I need to tell you something. I'm not who you think I am. He slid his phone across the table. Articles, headlines. CEO Edward Callahan of Callahan Shipping Industries announces fleet expansion. Photos of my brother at a podium wearing a suit that probably cost more than my monthly rent. I stared, looked up at him, back at the phone. I don't understand. Edward's voice was steady. I'm the CEO of a national freight shipping company. We own a cargo fleet, warehouses in 8 states, net worth around $340 million. I've been not exactly honest about my circumstances. My confusion turned to anger fast. You lied to me for 5 years. Edward didn't flinch. I needed you to see what you could build on your own. Back in 2017, when you left Millbrook with $88,000, and I asked you for $58,000, I genuinely needed it. I wasn't rich then. I was scrambling just like you, trying to keep a boat from being seized. But you gave it to me in hours. No questions. No hesitation. Meanwhile, Ashley wouldn't even let you finish your sentence when you offered her $50,000. That moment told me everything I needed to know about who you both were. I was still processing. Edward kept going. That $58,000 you gave me, I used it to save my first cargo boat. Built my company from there. Took 3 years of brutal work, but by 2020, I'd made it. And once I had resources, I made a choice. If you could sacrifice for me when I had nothing, I'd make sure you had real opportunities when I had everything. Every lucky break since then, Ray hiring you the rent help from the church, even Trevor's contract before Ashley poisoned it, I arranged those. Not the sabotage. That was real. But the opportunities I created. I didn't give you success. I just made sure the doors were unlocked when you were ready to walk through them. My hands were shaking. You watched me struggle. Edward's eyes were wet. I watched you survive, then thrive. If I'd just handed you money, you would have felt like charity. You needed to earn it, to prove to yourself that you could stand on your own. I didn't test you, Robert. You saved me. And I spent 5 years making sure I could return the favor without taking away what you'd built. I went through every emotion at that table. Anger, you stood by while I nearly lost everything. Gratitude, you kept me from being homeless. Confusion, why not just help openly? Edward leaned forward. Because you needed to know you did this, that your success came from your own hands. Your own choices, your own character. Ashley proved who she was when she had everything and chose cruelty. You proved who you are when you had almost nothing and chose generosity. I didn't bet on you, brother. I just repaid a debt. We both stood, met across the table, hugged, both of us crying. Other diners stared. We didn't care. My brother, my actual brother, had been watching over me for 5 years. Not controlling, not rescuing. Just making sure the door was open when I was ready to walk through. A week later, Mr. Grayson found me at the marina. I got a call from Edward Callahan. Spoke very highly of you. Robert, I'm 72. My wife wants me to retire. I'm thinking about selling the marina. You interested? I blinked. Sir, I don't have that kind of money. Grayson smiled. Price is $520,000. You'd need $170,000 down. Bank loan for the rest. Edward said he'd co-sign your loan, and he'll cover the down payment if you need it. That night, Edward called. About that $58,000 you loaned me back in 2017, here's your repayment. $58,000 principal plus $180,000 on top. Call it a partner investment for the man who saved my company before it even existed. Buy that marina, Robert. You've earned this. The moment that broke me was staring at Edward's phone screen in that fancy restaurant. Seeing my brother, who I thought was a struggling sailor like me, in a CEO photo at a shipping conference. My voice shook. Everything I thought I knew about you is a lie. Edward's eyes filled. No. Everything you know about yourself is true. I just hid my part. You did this, Robert. You gave me almost everything you had when I was drowning. You survived 5 years with nothing but your own grit. You built a reputation that made Grayson trust you with his legacy. I only made sure you had fair chances to show the world what I already knew, that you're the kind of man who deserves success because you'd give it away to save someone else. My face went through it all. Anger melted into understanding, then gratitude. Then overwhelming emotion crashed over me like a gulf wave. I couldn't breathe, couldn't speak, just stood and reached across the table. We held each other while expensive wine sat untouched, and other people whispered. I didn't care. This man, my brother, had saved my life without ever making me feel small. I signed the papers on the last Tuesday of April. Stephen pushed the keys across his desk. Real keys to the marina gate, the office, the fuel station, everything. Congratulations, Mr. Callahan. You're a business owner. I walked out onto the docks I'd scrubbed as a maintenance worker 6 years ago. Same docks, but mine now. Ray found me 2 hours later, still standing there, clutching the keys. You okay, boss? I wasn't sure, but I knew one thing. I'd built something that couldn't be taken away. Edward had given me $238,000, 58 returned, plus $180 in partnership. Grayson had sold me the marina for $520. $170 down, $350 bank loan with Edward's co-signature. I owned equity worth at least $195 after the down payment. Real ownership. Not charity. Not luck. I'd earned the chance. Edward had just made sure the door was unlocked. And now at 61, I owned something solid. Something mine. Something Ashley couldn't touch, or so I thought. The name painted on the yacht's stern felt almost cruel the first time I saw it. Second chance. At that point in my life, I didn't believe in second chances. Not for families, not for dreams, not for men who had already been written off. I believed in survival. I believed in endurance. I believed in getting through the day without collapsing under the weight of what I'd lost. I didn't buy her to forgive my daughter. I bought her to forgive myself. For 30 years, I had postponed my own dreams in the name of responsibility. Every decision I made was framed around what was practical, what was expected, what kept the family stable. I told myself that sacrifice was the price of love, that dreams could wait, that there would always be time later. There wasn't. I found the yacht in May, tucked into the far corner of a salvage yard, where abandoned boats waited to be stripped for parts, or quietly forgotten. She was 42 feet long, hull dulled to a lifeless gray, her name barely visible beneath layers of old paint. Moss crept along the waterline. The teak rails were cracked and dry. She looked tired, used up. So did I. The broker walked me through the yard with practiced indifference. She's been sitting here a while, he said. Owner ran out of money halfway through refit. Engines shot. Interiors gutted. She's not pretty. I ran my hand along the hull anyway. The fiberglass felt solid beneath the neglect. How much I asked. He named a number that was higher than I could afford and lower than she was worth. I told him what I had. Cash. No financing. No contingencies. No inspection beyond what my eyes and hands could tell me. He studied me for a long moment. Then he nodded. Deal. I signed the papers that afternoon. Ray met me at the yard the next day. He walked the deck slowly, knuckles rapping against the hull eyes, narrowing at the engine compartment. He didn't sugarcoat anything. You've got 4 months of work here, he said. Maybe 5 if you want her right. Then I better get started, I replied. Ray grinned. I'll bring beer on Sundays. The restoration became a ritual. Every evening after the marina closed, I drove to the dry dock and worked until my arms ached and my hands burned. Sanding became meditation. The hull had been painted 7 times, each layer hiding the one beneath. I stripped her down to bare fiberglass inch by inch, breathing in dust and memory. Ray showed up most weekends. Sometimes Joe joined us. Sometimes Edward called to check in. We didn't talk much while we worked. We didn't need to. Silence carried its own kind of honesty. The engine nearly broke me. It cost more than I'd planned, and the replacement required rewiring half the systems on board. The interior followed electrical plumbing cabinetry upholstery. Every fix revealed another problem waiting underneath. I could have stopped. I could have sold her at a loss. No one would have blamed me. But quitting would have meant admitting that some things really were beyond saving. Edward called one Sunday in July. "Let me help," he said. I didn't argue. He'd earned the right. By late August, she was whole again. White hull, navy trim, new canvas. The name repainted in clean, sharp letters. Second chance. September brought the launch. Edward flew in from Charleston. Ray brought champagne. A handful of dock workers gathered at the pier to watch her slide back into the water. Edward stood at the bow bottle in hand and struck it against the hull. The crack echoed across the harbor. "To second chances," he said. I didn't correct him. That night I slept aboard for the first time. The cabin smelled of varnish and fresh wood. I lay in the berth, listening to water lap against the hull, feeling something I hadn't felt in decades. Not relief, not happiness, but permission. "It's okay now," I whispered into the dark. "I'm finally doing it." October brought Joe Martinez to my office. He was one of the younger dock workers, mid-30s, reliable, rarely late. He knocked twice and stood in the doorway like a man bracing for impact. "I need to ask you something," he said. I waved him in. He sat stiffly, hands clenched. "My daughter Emma, she's 7. She needs heart surgery. Insurance won't cover it. I've been saving, but I'm short $18,000. I didn't hesitate. "I'll take care of it." Joe froze. "I can't." "You're not asking me to," I said. "I'm telling you. Give me the hospital's billing number." I paid that afternoon. When Joe found out, he came back and cried. I stood, walked around the desk, and hugged him, awkward, certain. "She'll be fine," I said. "That's all that matters." By November, I formalized something that had been growing quietly in my mind. With Edward's guidance, I established the Crescent Harbor Maritime Scholarship Fund, $25,000 a year, split between 3 students pursuing vocational paths in maritime trades. The first recipients were Tyler, Jessica, and Marcus, kids with talent and discipline, but no financial runway. I met them at the marina in December. Tyler shook my hand like it was a contract. "I won't waste this," he said. "I know," I replied. I also began donating to the local food bank, funded repairs at the family shelter on Shoreline Road. Quiet contributions, no press, no announcements. It wasn't about charity. It was about proof that I could build something useful instead of destructive. Edward visited again in late November. We sat on the deck of Second Chance, coffee in hand, watching gulls circle above the water. "You've changed," he said. I had to. "No," he replied. "You chose to." He pulled out his phone. "Let me take a picture." For the marina site, I stood at the bow, wind tugging at my shirt. Edward framed the shot carefully. "Perfect," he said. I didn't know then how far that image would travel. I didn't know it would leave the marina. I didn't know that 23 days later I'd receive a call from a number I hadn't heard from in 5 years. And I definitely didn't know that everything I'd built was about to be tested in ways I couldn't yet imagine. Edward's social media post took 6 hours to reach 1,200 likes. By hour 7, it had reached Millbrook. By hour 8, my phone was vibrating with messages from numbers I thought I'd never see again. And just like that, the 7 years of peace I'd built began to crack. I knew they'd come before they booked the flight. What I didn't know was how much I'd need to prepare, or how much it would hurt to see her face again after all that time. Monday morning. Edward called at 8:15. "Check your phone." I posted about the marina's anniversary on social media. I hadn't opened my accounts in months. Stephen had set them up for business purposes, but I never used them. I opened the app. There it was, a photo of Edward and me standing on the dock. The name Second Chance. Clear in the background, the office sign visible behind us, Callahan Maritime Services, Robert Callahan, owner. The caption read, "I'm proud to celebrate 1 year with my brother Robert and the incredible journey he's taken to own Crescent Harbor Marina. A story of resilience, second chances, and the power of starting over." The likes were climbing fast. Edward had 18,000 followers, mostly shipping executives, logistics managers, fleet operators. The comments poured in. Congratulations. Inspiring. Legend. My stomach twisted. Ed, you tagged the marina's business page. And my profile. Yeah, that's standard for, I've been invisible for 7 years. You just put a spotlight on me. There was a pause. I'm sorry. I didn't think. It's done, I said. It's out there now. By hour 8, my phone, my old number, the one I'd never changed, started lighting up. Unknown number, Dad. It's Ashley. Saw Edward's post. You're still alive. We need to talk. I stared at the screen. My hands shook. I didn't reply. Second message, Connor and I have been so worried. 7 years is a long time. Call me. A third came, then a fourth. I muted the phone, left the office, and walked to the end of the dock. I sat at the edge, legs hanging over the water. Ray found me there 20 minutes later. You okay? They found me. Your family? I nodded. You want me to run them off? I smiled faintly. Can't run forever. They'll come. Tuesday. I checked my phone. 47 missed calls. 23 texts, 12 voicemails. I didn't listen to any of them, Stephen called. Got something interesting. Connor's company has been negotiating with Callahan Maritime for 8 months. Annual logistics contract worth $450,000. His assistant emailed this morning asking to move the final meeting up to this week if possible. He still doesn't know you're the owner. I processed that. How do you know he doesn't know? 'Cause his emails to me are professional but impersonal. He calls me Mr. Carlson, not Robert's lawyer. He's blind. So he's been begging me for a contract for 8 months, and he doesn't know it's me. Every proposal, every revision. You've read all of them. I leaned back in my chair. The irony was almost unbearable. Friday. Stephen forwarded an email. Connor's assistant booked flights, 2 tickets, Connor and Ashley Thorne, arriving Thursday at 2 p.m. I sat alone in my dark apartment that night and pulled up an old voice recording from 7 years ago, saved on the device backed up in the cloud. I pressed play, Ashley's voice. Dad, look at yourself. All you do is take up space, Connor's voice. Get out of the way, old man. I stopped it, played it again, memorized every syllable. I turned to Sarah's photo on the nightstand. Is this revenge or justice? I whispered. I don't even know anymore. But they're coming. And I need to remember why I can't fall apart. I sat in the dark apartment and played the recording again. 4th time. My own voice in the background. Sweetheart, just listen to me. Ashley, a burden. I cried quietly. Then I forced myself to stop. I hit play again. 5th time. Wiped my eyes between listens. Whispered to myself, remember. Remember what she did. Remember why you can't let her in again. 6th time. No more tears. Just cold resolve hardening in my jaw. Wednesday evening, I stood on the deck of Second Chance and watched the sunset paint the Gulf in red and orange. Ray appeared with 2 beers, handed me one without a word. Heard they're flying in tomorrow, he said finally. Small towns, even marina communities, spread news fast. I nodded. You gonna be okay? I thought about it. I don't know, but I won't let them see me weak. Not again. He clinked his bottle against mine. Good. Because you're not that man anymore. I drank. The sun dropped below the horizon. Somewhere above us, a plane was being fueled for a flight south. Somewhere in Millbrook, two people were packing bags and rehearsing their words. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the scar tissue and the silence, a small voice whispered, "They're coming. And this time, you're ready." Before I reveal what happened in that office, pause for a second. How would you handle this if you were in my position? Your son-in-law has been negotiating with you for 8 months and has no idea you're the one on the other side. Do you expose him? Do you walk away? Comment below and let me know you're still here. I want to see what you'd do before I tell you what I did. And a quick note. The story ahead contains fictionalized elements for narrative purposes. If that's not for you, feel free to stop here. Connor walked into my office at exactly 9 a.m. leather briefcase, polished, pitch rehearsed. He made it 3 steps before he saw the nameplate on my desk. The briefcase hit the floor. The business meeting was only the opening round. The real confrontation, the one that would decide everything, would happen on my boat 12 hours later. It was 8:58 when I sat at my desk reviewing papers I didn't need to review. I'd read Connor's proposal 100 times. I knew every clause, every contingency, every desperate revision he'd made over the past 8 months. I heard his voice at the front desk. "Connor Thorne, 9 o'clock with Mr. Callahan." My chest tightened. I steadied my breathing. The door opened. He walked in with the kind of confidence that comes from years of closing deals, pressed suit, polished shoes, briefcase swinging at his side. He extended his hand. "Mr. Callahan, it's an honor to finally meet in per." He stopped mid-sentence. His eyes locked on the nameplate. "Robert Callahan, owner." I stayed seated. Didn't offer my hand. "Hello, Connor. Sit down." The briefcase slipped from his fingers and hit the floor with a dull thud. Stephen, sitting quietly in the corner chair, cleared his throat. "Please, Mr. Thorne. Have a seat." Connor lowered himself into the chair like a man sitting in a courtroom dock. His face had gone pale. You're the owner this whole time." I leaned back in my chair, fingers steepled. "I've known who you were since your first email 8 months ago. April 18th. Subject line, Logistics Partnership Proposal, Thorne Solutions. Would you like me to quote it back to you?" I turned my laptop toward him. The screen showed 47 emails between Stephen's firm and Connor's company. Every proposal, every revision, every desperate follow-up when he dropped his price from $480,000 to $450 last month. I read everyone," I said. Stephen handled the replies, but every decision, every delay, every request for additional information, that was me. Connor's mouth opened, but no sound came out. "Why would you? This is business. We can put the past." Put aside what exactly? I opened the drawer of my desk and pulled out my phone. I set it face up on the desk between us and pressed play. The recording filled the room, Ashley's voice sharp and bitter. "Dad, look at yourself. All you do is occupy space with your pathetic salary from a dead-end job. Connor needs an office. Either move your stuff to the garage or, better yet, find somewhere to live off the grid and stop being a burden." Connor's voice cold and dismissive. "Get out of the way, old man. We've got work to do." The sound of me stumbling, a chair scraping. Connor's face drained of color. I let the recording play for another 10 seconds, then stopped it. "That was 7 years ago," I said. "November 13th, 2017, 10:30 p.m. I've listened to it every year on the anniversary. It keeps me motivated." Connor's hands trembled. We were young, under pressure. The business was..." I held up a hand. "The answer is no." He blinked. "No. The contract goes to Gulf Horizon Logistics. Smaller company. Veteran-owned. They're charging me $380,000 a year. I'm paying less than your proposal and getting people who actually appreciate the opportunity." Connor leaned forward, desperation bleeding into his voice. Please, without this contract, we'll lose everything. The company, the house. Good, I said. You deserve to know what that feels like. I stood. The meeting was over. Stephen will show you out. Connor tried one last time. Ashley's outside. She wants to talk to you. Father and daughter. Tell my daughter she can meet me tomorrow morning. 8 a.m. on my boat. She knows which one. The name's painted right on the stern. I nodded toward the door. Joe Martinez stepped inside, arms crossed. Boss, Mr. Thorne is leaving. Please escort him to his car. Connor stood slowly, picked up his briefcase, and walked toward the door like a man who'd just watched his empire collapse in real time. Stephen stayed behind. He didn't say anything, didn't need to. I walked to the window and watched Joe escort Connor across the parking lot. Ashley jumped out of a rental car and grabbed Connor's arm. I couldn't hear her question, but I saw her face crumble when he shook his head. Stephen joined me at the window. She'll try next, he said quietly. Tomorrow morning, on your boat. She'll see the name and think it means you forgive her. Ashley was crying now. Connor stood frozen, staring at the ground. Let her think that, I said. Let her hope for one more night. Tomorrow I'll take that away too. After Connor left, I sat alone in my office for a long time. The recording was still on my phone, paused mid-sentence. I didn't delete it. I never would. Stephen knocked once and stepped back in. You okay? I nodded. I'm fine. He hesitated. What are you going to say to her tomorrow? I looked out the window again. The rental car was gone. The parking lot was empty except for the gulls picking at something near the dumpster. I don't know yet, I said. But whatever it is, it won't be what she's hoping for. Somewhere out there, Ashley was rehearsing her apology. Somewhere out there, Connor was trying to explain to her how badly they'd miscalculated. And somewhere deep in my chest, beneath the scar tissue and the silence, I felt something I hadn't felt in 7 years, control. Tomorrow she'd come to the boat. She'd see the name Second Chance and think it meant redemption. She'd cry, she'd beg, she'd say all the things she thought I needed to hear, and I'd let her finish. Then I'd say no, not because I hated her, but because forgiveness isn't something you're owed. It's something you earn, and she hadn't earned it. Ashley stepped onto my boat at 8 a.m. the next morning. I didn't invite her. I didn't need to. She saw the name Second Chance painted on the stern and assumed it was a message for her. She had no idea what the name really meant. That conversation on the deck would be the last direct conversation we'd have for 9 months. But it wouldn't be the last time she tried to hurt me. I'd been standing on the deck since 7:45, coffee in hand, watching the sun climb over the harbor. I heard footsteps on the dock, slow, hesitant, each footfall uncertain, like someone walking toward a door they weren't sure would open. Ashley appeared at the edge of the pier. No Connor. She was alone. Her eyes were red-faced, drawn. She stopped at the gangway, hands gripping the strap of her purse. Dad, can I come aboard? I didn't move. You're already on my boat. She climbed up carefully. Her gaze swept the polished deck, the gleaming rails, the name painted in bold white letters on the stern. She tried to smile through the tears starting to well up. You named it Second Chance, she said, voice breaking. That has to mean something, right? That you believe in. Second chances. I set my coffee down and turned to face her fully. The sun was behind me now, and I could see every detail of her face, the lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the tremble in her jaw. I named this boat Second Chance because at 56 years old, I got a second chance to live the dream I gave up when I was young, when I gave up the ocean for a family that made it clear I had no value. This boat is my second chance to choose myself. Her face collapsed. The small hope she'd been clinging to, the idea that the name was some kind of olive branch, shattered visibly. Dad, No, I said quietly. You don't get to finish that sentence yet. She stood frozen, then her desperation surfaced. We were wrong. I know that. But we're family. We owe $280,000 business debt the house. Without that contract, we'll lose everything. I'm begging you. I let the silence sit between us for a long moment. The water lapped softly against the hull. How does it feel? I asked finally. To beg someone you threw away. She was crying now. Really crying, shoulders shaking, hands pressed to her face. I'll do anything. Please, just help us. Anything, I repeated, except value me 7 years ago when it actually mattered. I was young under pressure. I didn't mean. You meant every word, I said. I have the recording. Connor heard it yesterday. She flinched like I'd struck her. I turned and walked to the stairs leading below deck. When I came back up, I was carrying an old folder, yellowed paper, weathered edges. I placed it on the table between us. What is that? She whispered. The appraisal for the house. Your mother's house. Dated November 10th, 2017. I opened the folder slowly. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in years, but had never forgotten. A realtor's estimate. Handwritten notes in the margins. I turned the page so she could see the number printed in bold at the top. Appraised value $185,000. I was going to sell it, I said. Give you $50,000 for your business and a down payment on a new place. I had the papers ready. I'd scheduled an appointment with the agent. Ashley stared at the documents like they were written in a language she didn't understand. Her hands trembled as she reached out and picked up the appraisal. Dad, you were going to help? That night at dinner, you called 50,000 pocket change before I could finish my sentence. You laughed. Connor mocked the amount. You never let me finish the plan. Her face cycled through shock, horror, understanding. The realization settling over her like a weight she couldn't lift. At the 50,000 you were offering, that would have been our safety net right now. Yes, I said. It would have been. But you called it pocket change and told me to go live off the grid, so I did. She set the papers down with shaking hands. We could have used that money. For the house, for the business. My voice was cold. Yes, you could have. But you mocked it and told me to disappear. And now you want a piece of the same 50,000. No. She tried one last card. Her voice cracked, desperate. What about Mom? Family was everything to her. She'd want you to help us. The anger I'd been holding back surged. Don't you dare use your mother's memory to manipulate me. Sarah would be ashamed of what you've become. She'd be heartbroken to know you treated me like garbage the second you didn't need me anymore. Ashley sobbed openly now. Please, Dad. The contract goes to Gulf Horizon Logistics. I signed the papers yesterday. You and Connor need to leave, right now, off my boat. She stood slowly, tears streaming down her face. You're going to let us lose everything. Yes, I said. Just like you let me walk away with nothing 7 years ago. At least I'm giving you a warning. You pushed me out. She paused at the edge of the boat, one hand on the rail. I'm sorry, she whispered. I didn't answer. She stepped off and walked slowly down the dock, shoulders shaking. Connor was waiting at the gate. He caught her when she nearly collapsed. A part of me, the part that still remembered her at 7 years old, holding Sarah's hand on the beach, wanted to call her back. But I didn't. I went below deck, poured a glass of whiskey at 9 in the morning, and waited for whatever they'd do next. I knew people like them didn't accept rejection quietly. I sat in the cabin with the appraisal folder still on the table, Sarah's photo beside the nav station, and the taste of something bitter and final in the back of my throat. I'd drawn the line. I'd held it. But it didn't feel like victory. It felt like survival, and survival I'd learned was never clean. They flew back to Millbrook on Saturday. By Monday morning, Ashley's social media post had 8,000 shares. By Wednesday, the local paper ran a story with my name in the headline. By Friday, 2 of my boat rental clients had canceled their bookings, and strangers were calling the office to tell me what a terrible father I was. Stephen told me I should sue for defamation. I said no. What they didn't understand was that I had a completely different plan, one that required the patience they'd never learned. Monday morning started quietly. I was at my desk reviewing fuel invoices when my phone began vibrating notifications I rarely saw because I barely used social media. Ray knocked once and stepped in his face tight with something between anger and concern. He held up his phone. "You need to see this." It was a public post from Ashley's account. The photo was her at 7 sitting on my shoulders at the beach, both of us laughing. The caption beneath it was carefully written, each word chosen to wound. Heartbroken to share that my father, now a wealthy marina owner, has refused to help his daughter through a family business crisis. When I reached out after 7 years hoping to reconcile, he turned me away. He has the means, but chose strangers over family. Money has changed him into someone I don't recognize. Praying for healing. Hashtag family first. Hashtag heartbroken. 8,000 shares. The comment section was split, some sympathizing with Ashley, others asking the obvious questions. Why 7 years of silence? There's always 2 sides to a story. One comment stood out. "Hey, I don't know the whole story, but she's his daughter. No matter what happened, you don't abandon your kid when she needs help. Rich people forget where they came from." I read it twice, then closed the app. Ray was still standing there waiting for me to say something. "What do you want me to do?" I asked finally. "Fight back," he said. "Tell the truth." Not yet. He didn't understand. I could see it in his face. But he nodded anyway and left the office. By Wednesday, the story had reached the press. The Millbrook Gazette ran an article, Connor's work, no doubt. The headline read, "Local business owners struggle as estranged father thrives a family divided by wealth." The article painted Ashley and Connor as victims. It quoted anonymous family friends and mentioned my refusal to reconcile. 3 regional news blogs picked it up. By Thursday afternoon, my office phone was ringing with questions from bloggers and a local TV station. I told the receptionist, no comment on family matters. Friday morning, Linda Brennan sent an email canceling a yacht rental worth $2,400. "I don't feel comfortable supporting your business given the family situation." A second client, a corporate retreat organizer, canceled without explanation. Stephen ran the numbers, $4,800 in lost revenue. I sat at my desk that evening after everyone had gone home and stared at the empty harbor. The sun was setting, painting the water orange and red. The following week, Connor escalated. He sent emails to contacts in the maritime industry, people from his business network, with subject lines like, "Concerns regarding character. Robert Callahan, Crescent Harbor Marina." The emails were vague, hinting at personal behavior inconsistent with professional ethics. 2 potential business partners, marine equipment suppliers, sent polite emails postponing meetings until next quarter. Ray confronted a client who asked about the family drama at the dock. The man had seen the articles, heard the whispers. Ray didn't hold back. "You want to know about Mr. Callahan's character? He paid $18,000 for my daughter's heart surgery when insurance denied us. He sponsors 3 kids through maritime school every year. He's a better man than any headline you read." The client stayed, booked a long-term slip. Joe Martinez did the same thing the next day when another customer brought it up. Emma, now 8, was thriving after her surgery. Joe told the story without hesitation, his voice steady and proud. The customer apologized and shook my hand on the way out, but not everyone stayed. The whispers continued. The phone calls slowed. The emails became shorter, more cautious. Early December brought news I'd been half expecting. Stephen walked into my office with a stack of papers. "Thorn Logistics Solutions filed for Chapter 7 bankruptcy this morning. They're liquidating assets. Auction scheduled for December 20th. I stared at the papers. The official filing the debt schedule listing $280,000, the list of creditors. Stephen spoke carefully. You could buy the company. Estimated liquidation value is $85,000. You'd own the thing that destroyed them. Let me think about it. That night, I sat alone on second chance, the cabin lit by a single lamp. Sarah's photo was beside the nav station, her face frozen in the smile I'd loved for 30 years. I spoke to her like I had 1,000 times since she died. What do you want me to do? Let them fall completely, or... I didn't finish the question. No answer came. The climax came late one night in my apartment. I'd opened my laptop and ended up on Ashley's post again. I read the comments, hundreds of them, until I found the one that cut deepest. She's his daughter. No matter what happened, you don't abandon your kid when she needs help. Rich people forget where they came from. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. Sarah's photo was on the nightstand. I whispered to it. Look, am I the villain in this story? Have I become the thing I used to hate? Silence. I remembered the shattered glass, the shove. 7 years of silence from them. No, I said quietly. I'm not the villain. I'm just the one who survived. But the doubt lingered. On December 15th, Stephen called with an update. Bankruptcy auction is in 5 days. If you want the company, decide soon. I stood on the deck of Second Chance, watching winter rain sweep across the Gulf. Edward's words echoed in my head. Revenge is a dish best served cold. But Sarah's voice was there too. Compassion is what lets you sleep at night. I didn't know which side was right, but I knew I had to choose. I bought my daughter's company for $95,000 on a cold December morning. Not because I wanted to own it, but because I wanted to give her one last chance to prove that beneath all the demands and bitterness, she was still someone worth saving. When I called Ashley 3 days after signing the papers, I already knew what I'd offer. 2 entry-level positions. No special favors. They'd start from the bottom, or they wouldn't start at all. December 20th. The bankruptcy courtroom was small and sterile, pale walls, fluorescent lights humming overhead, rows of empty benches. I sat in the back. Only 4 people had shown up. The trustee stood at the front, reading from a document in a voice drained of all emotion. Thorn Logistics Solutions. Total estimated liquidation value $85,000. He opened bidding at $70,000. Silence. I raised my hand. $85,000? A man in the second row raised his paddle. $87,000. I didn't hesitate. $95,000 cash, plus I'll assume $40,000 in outstanding supplier debt. The trustee looked up. Total consideration $135,000. Any other bids? Silence. The gavel came down. Sold to Mr. Robert Callahan. 2 days later, I sat alone on Second Chance. A glass of whiskey untouched beside me, Sarah's photo in my hands. The harbor was quiet. Most of the boats had cleared out for the holidays. It was just me, the water, and the ghosts. I spoke out loud to the photograph. Sarah, I don't know what you'd want. She's your daughter. Part of me wants to let them hit bottom completely. They deserve it. But part of me remembers the girl who helped you plan that business over Sunday dinners. Which part should I listen to? I studied her face, the smile frozen in time, the warmth in her eyes I'd never see again. You always said everyone deserves a chance to become the person they're supposed to be. Even Ashley. I set the photo down and picked up my phone. Dialed Stephen. Draft 2 employment contracts. Junior logistics coordinator and operations assistant. $38,000 each. Probationary period, standard terms, no nepotism clauses. Understood, Stephen said. When do you want to make the offer? Give them a week, I said. Let them sit with the loss first. December 28th. I sat at my kitchen table, Ashley's number on my phone screen. My hand trembled slightly as I pressed dial. It rang 3 times before she answered. "Hello!" Her voice was guarded, brittle. "Ashley, it's Dad." Silence. "But I know," she said finally. "What do you want?" "The company's mine now. Finalized last week. You have 48 hours to clear your personal belongings from the office." Her voice broke. "So you bought it just to shut us down completely?" "No," I said. "I bought it to honor your mother. She helped you plan that business before she got sick. I won't let her work die because you made terrible choices." Another silence, longer this time. When Ashley spoke again, her voice was smaller. "Mom, you remember that?" "I remember everything, Ashley. That's the difference between us." I paused, then continued. "I'm restructuring it as Callahan Logistics. I have 2 entry-level positions. Junior Coordinator, 38,000. Operations Assistant, 38,000. No benefits for the first 6 months. 90-day probation. You report to managers, not to me. You work office hours. You prove your value or you're out." Connor's voice erupted in the background. She'd put me on speaker. "That's insulting." Being shoved into a wall and called a burden in my own home was insulting too, I said evenly. "But I survived. You will too if you choose to." Ashley's voice came back quieter now. Why offer this after everything?" My voice thickened. "Because your mother loved you. And I have to believe that somewhere underneath all the cruelty, there's still the person she raised. But you have to do the work. I'm offering a chance, a second chance you don't deserve, but I'm giving anyway." Another long silence. Ashley was crying. "What if we fail? Then you get fired, like anyone else. This isn't charity. This is your last opportunity." The climax came in that moment, Ashley's question hanging in the air, and my answer coming from a place deeper than anger or pride. "I can't forgive you," I said quietly. "I may never forgive you, but I can't watch you collapse completely and face your mother someday, wherever she is, knowing I had the power to give you a chance and didn't. This isn't about you, Ashley. It's about me being able to live with myself." The silence on the other end was absolute. She was processing the truth. Her father was saving her, not out of love, but out of loyalty to a ghost. "You have 48 hours to decide," I said. "Stephen will send the contracts." I hung up before she could respond. On December 30th, Stephen's phone chimed with an email. Subject line, 2 words. "We accept." He forwarded it to me. I stood at the office window watching gulls dive for fish in the shallows, thinking about second chances and whether boats were easier to restore than people. That night I returned to Second Chance and sat in the cabin with Sarah's photo. I spoke to it one more time. I did what you would have wanted. I gave her a chance. But I'm not giving her forgiveness. Not yet. Maybe not ever. I hope that's enough. The boat rocked gently in the current. The harbor lights reflected off the water, casting shifting patterns across the cabin walls. Outside, the wind picked up. Inside, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not peace exactly, but the absence of war. I'd made my choice. Compassion with boundaries. Mercy with conditions. It wasn't the ending anyone expected, but it was the one I could live with. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Ashley's first day back at her old company, she clocked in at 7:58 a.m., received a stack of files from Ray Thompson's desk, and worked without looking up until noon. I watched through the glass partition from the marina office. She didn't cry. Connor cried on day 3. 6 months isn't enough time to rebuild trust that took 7 years to destroy. But it's enough time to see whether they're capable of trying or just going through the motions until something better comes along. January 2nd. Ashley walked into the office at 7:55, early and anxious. She signed in at the reception desk. Ray met her there, his face neutral, professional. Cubicle 3, your computer logins on the sticky note, training manuals on the desk. Read it. She walked past her old corner office, Ray's now running an operations meeting inside, and arrived at her cubicle. Small, standard, facing a wall instead of a window. She sat down, opened the manual, and started reading. Co-workers stared, whispered. She kept her head down. Connor arrived at the warehouse at 7 a.m., earlier shift than Ashley's. Derek Walsh handed him an inventory scanner. You'll log every item. Accuracy is everything. Errors get docked from your pay. Connor nodded, took the scanner, and started working. At lunch, he sat alone in his truck, hands shaking. He let himself cry for 5 minutes, then wiped his face and went back to work. March came quietly. Ashley stayed late one evening, 6:30, finishing a customer database update. Routine work, but she was doing it meticulously. Ray walked past her cubicle. You don't need to impress me, Ashley." She looked up. "I'm not trying to impress anyone. I don't know what I'm trying to do anymore." Ray leaned against the doorframe. "Learn humility, maybe. Your father did. Started from the bottom, worked his way up. You can too." It was the first time anyone had acknowledged that Robert had walked this same road. Ashley nodded slowly. Ray left. She turned back to her work, and something in her expression shifted. Maybe understanding was starting to take root. April. Connor and Ashley sat in their rental apartment after long shifts. Both exhausted. Takeout for dinner, something they couldn't afford regularly, but it was Friday, and neither had the energy to cook. Connor spoke first. "Do you think he'll ever forgive us?" Ashley stared at her food. "I don't know. But I'm starting to understand why he shouldn't." Connor looked at her, surprised. "We destroyed him, Connor. He tried to help, and we treated him like trash." It was the first real admission of guilt between them. Silence settled over the room. They sat with that truth, neither one able to look away from it anymore. June, 6-month review. Ashley sat in Ray's office, the evaluation form between them. Performance meets expectations. You're cleared to continue. Any questions? Ashley hesitated. Does he ask about me? Ray paused, then answered honestly. Every week. I tell him you're trying. That's all I can say. Ashley's eyes welled slightly. Ray pulled a folded note from his desk drawer. He told me to give you this if you made it through 6 months. He handed her a small piece of paper. 3 words in Robert's handwriting. Keep going. Not I'm proud. Not I forgive you. Just keep going. Ashley stared at the words. Whispered, okay. Connor's review with Derek was similar. Meets expectations. Cleared to continue. Derek mentioned, Mr. Callahan tracks all employee progress. You're doing fine. Keep it up. The climax came in that moment. Ashley, sitting in her cubicle after the review, holding Robert's note, looking through the glass partition toward Ray's office. Her old corner office, seeing her own reflection in the glass. Older, tired, changed. She whispered to herself, I'm trying, Dad. I really am. The camera held on her face. Exhaustion, regret, a tiny flicker of hope, all mixed together. She folded the note carefully, put it in her wallet, and returned to her database entry work. Late June evening. I drove past the office after hours and saw lights still on. Through the window, I recognized Ashley at her desk, head down over paperwork. Connor's truck was at the loading dock, working late on inventory. They weren't doing it to impress me. I don't think they even knew I sometimes drove by. They were doing it because that's the price you pay when you rebuild from zero. I sat in my truck for 10 minutes, watching, remembering what it felt like to be 56 and starting over with $30,000. Then I drove away. They didn't need to know I'd been there. That night on Second Chance, I sat in the cabin with Sarah's photo. I spoke to it quietly. Look, they're trying. I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if anything will ever be enough. But they're trying. I set the photo down and looked out at the harbor. The water was calm, reflecting the dock lights in long ripples. Somewhere in Millbrook, Ashley and Connor were in their small apartment, probably exhausted, probably wondering if their father would ever look at them the same way again. The answer was no. I would never look at them the same way. The old version of us, the family we were before November 2017, was gone. Shattered glass doesn't go back together the same way, even if you manage to glue the pieces. But maybe we could build something new, something smaller, something honest. Not love, maybe, but respect. Not reconciliation, but coexistence. 6 months wasn't enough time to know. But it was a start. I finished my whiskey, turned off the cabin light, and went to bed. Tomorrow, Ray would send me the weekly report. I'd read it, file it away, and go back to keeping my distance. That was the deal I'd made with myself. Give them a chance, but protect yourself first. It wasn't perfect, but it was all I had. Edward found me on the deck of Second Chance, early on a Sunday morning, coffee steam curling into the Gulf breeze. I hadn't heard his car pull in, but I knew it was him the moment I saw the familiar silhouette approaching the dock. He never called ahead. He never needed to. Sunday mornings had quietly become his territory. "You're softer than you think, brother," he said, as he stepped aboard, setting a paper bag of pastries on the small table between us. I scoffed, ready to argue the word soft landing like an accusation. For most of my life, softness had meant weakness. It meant giving too much, staying too long, letting people cross lines because you were afraid of being alone. But something about the way Edward said it made me pause. Maybe soft wasn't an insult. Maybe soft was just another word for human. Edward poured himself coffee from the thermos he always brought and sat beside me without saying anything else. 5 full minutes passed. No small talk. No questions. Just the sound of gulls crying overhead and the gentle knock of water against the hull. Then he asked the question that would follow me for the next 3 months. "If Sarah could see all of this," he said quietly, "what you've done, what they're doing, would she say you did right?" I opened my mouth to answer. Nothing came out. That silence was heavier than any accusation Ashley had ever thrown at me. I stared at the water, watching sunlight ripple across the surface, buying time I didn't have. "I don't know," I finally admitted. Edward nodded as if he'd expected that answer all along. Not knowing, he said, "That's the part that keeps you awake at night." He was right. It did. More nights than I wanted to admit. Edward's visits were never dramatic. He never raised his voice. He never told me what to do. He just showed up, sat beside me, and asked questions that refused to stay buried. That Sunday was no different. "Ray says they're still showing up," he said casually, tearing a pastry in half. "Every day," I replied. "Ashley stayed until 9 on Tuesday." Edward chewed slowly. "That's not fear of getting fired." "Or it is," I said. "Fear of failing again. Fear of losing everything again. That doesn't mean she's changed." Edward didn't argue. He just watched me carefully. "Let me ask you something else," he said. "You say you're doing this to honor Sarah, but have you really asked yourself what she would want, not what you think she'd want? What she'd actually say if she were sitting here right now?" I shifted in my chair, discomfort tightening my chest. "She'd want them to learn responsibility," I said. "Consequences." "Maybe," Edward replied. "Or maybe she'd want you to stop carrying this pain for the rest of your life." Both things can be true. The words landed harder than I expected. I turned my gaze toward the horizon, where the water blurred into sky, hoping distance might soften the weight of what he was saying. Edward didn't rush me. He never did. "You're punishing them," he continued. "And I understand why. But you're also punishing yourself. Every time you drive past that office at night. Every time you ask Ray for updates. That's not freedom, brother. That's another kind of prison." My jaw tightened. I wanted to deny it. Instead, I told him the truth. "I watch them sometimes," I said. "Through the window. I park down the road where they can't see my truck. Edward didn't react. He didn't flinch or judge. I feel pathetic doing it. I continued. But I can't stop. I'm looking for something. Proof they've changed. Or proof they haven't, so I can cut them off and finally feel justified. And what do you see? He asked. I swallowed. I see two people who look exhausted, I said. The kind of tired that goes past the body and settles into your bones. The same tired I was at 56. I paused before adding, it doesn't make me forgive them. But it makes me understand something I didn't want to. Edward waited. Suffering doesn't belong to villains alone, I said quietly. Even the people who hurt you can still be hurting. Edward nodded slowly. You remember the $58,000 test I put you through? He asked. I almost smiled despite myself. Hard to forget. You passed it because you gave without expecting anything back, he said. That was grace. Maybe that's what you're doing now. My throat tightened. That doesn't mean they've earned forgiveness, Edward added quickly. It means you're still the man Sarah married. My voice cracked before I could stop it. I don't feel like that man, I said. I feel angry, tired, confused most days. Edward smiled sadly. Good. That means you're not pretending to be a saint. You're just a father trying to do right by a ghost and a daughter who can't see you clearly yet. The word ghost undid me. He asked one final question softer than the others. If Sarah walked through that gate right now, he said, what would she say about all of this? Tears welled before I could stop them. She'd call me stubborn, I whispered. She'd say family's messy and love doesn't keep score. My shoulders shook. But she'd also hold me, I continued, and tell me it's okay to still hurt. The tears fell freely then. The first time I'd cried in front of Edward since Sarah's funeral. I miss her so much, I said. Every day. This would be easier if she were here. Edward squeezed my shoulder. Easier, he asked gently. Or just as complicated. But with her hand to hold. I let out a broken laugh. Just as complicated. But bearable. We sat there together, two grown men crying quietly, as the gulls circled overhead and the boat rocked beneath us. Edward left around noon. I stayed on the deck until sunset, replaying every word. That night, alone in the cabin, I spoke to Sarah's photograph one more time. I don't know if I'm doing this right, I said. But I'm trying to be the man you believed I could be, even when I don't believe it myself. The boat creaked softly in the dark. Somewhere between grief and exhaustion, something shifted. Not peace, not closure, but acceptance. Acceptance that some questions don't have answers. That some wounds don't fully heal. That you can love someone and still protect yourself. Edward's words echoed in my mind. You're softer than you think. Maybe he was right. Maybe soft wasn't weakness. Maybe soft was the courage to keep your heart open when everything in you wanted to shut it down. I turned off the light, lay back, and stared into the dark. Tomorrow I would wake up and keep doing the hardest thing of all, trying. So here I am, 64 years old, standing on the deck of a boat named Second Chance, watching the marina wake up the way it does every morning. The water is calm today, barely moving, and the air smells like salt and fuel and wet wood. 7.5 years have passed since my daughter looked across a kitchen table and told me I was a burden. Some mornings that feels like a lifetime ago. Other mornings it feels like yesterday. People still ask questions when they recognize me. They ask if I've forgiven her. I usually say I'm trying because that answer doesn't require explanation. They ask if we're a family again. That question never lands cleanly. I tell them we're working because working is something I understand. What I understand best now is routine. Every weekday starts the same way. I wake before sunrise, make coffee in the small galley, and step outside while the docks are still quiet. I walk the length of the marina, checking lines, listening to generators hum to life, watching the first crews arrive. It grounds me. It reminds me that systems work when people show up consistently, not when they make promises. Ashley shows up consistently now. Connor does too. Ashley works in the office. Connor works operations. They are employees like everyone else. They clock in. They clock out. They submit reports. They meet deadlines. They make mistakes and correct them. No one treats them specially, and I make sure of that. Favoritism destroys organizations faster than incompetence. They don't live the life they once believed was owed to them. The large house is gone. The expensive furniture is gone. The sense of entitlement is quieter, now replaced by fatigue and responsibility. They rent a modest apartment. They drive older cars. Their conversations revolve around schedules, bills, and work obligations instead of ambition and leverage. I don't comment on any of it. I've learned that commentary invites interpretation, and interpretation invites conflict. Silence, when used carefully, gives people space to reveal who they are without pressure. I keep my distance on purpose. I don't attend meetings they're part of. I don't stop by their workstations. If I need information, I ask their supervisors. If they need approval, it goes through the proper channels. Boundaries are easier to maintain when they are procedural rather than emotional. Sometimes we pass each other in hallways or on the dock. We nod. Occasionally, we exchange a few neutral words. There are no apologies in those moments, no explanations, no attempts to rewrite the past. Just acknowledgement. Trust doesn't rebuild because time passes. It rebuilds, if it ever does, because behavior remains consistent under pressure. I had to learn that lesson when no one was watching me. Now I apply it everywhere. The marina runs smoothly. Slips stay full. Maintenance stays on schedule. Complaints are minimal. Ray manages the dock crews. Stephen handles contracts and legal matters. Joe oversees logistics. I review reports and approve decisions, but I no longer feel the need to insert myself into everything. Most mornings after the docks are settled, I sit on the edge of second chance with my coffee and watch the water. That's where my thinking happens now. Not in offices, not in arguments, on quiet decks with nothing demanding an answer. There are moments that catch me off guard. Sometimes I see Ashley bent over her desk, focused in a way that reminds me of her mother. Not the confidence, not the authority, just the concentration. Sometimes I watch Connor loading inventory with the same stubborn intensity I once had when I was trying to keep my life from collapsing. I notice these things. I don't attach meaning to them. For a long time, I tried to decide what everything meant. Every action, every effort, every mistake. Eventually, I realized that interpretation was just another form of control. Now I let actions exist without assigning outcomes. Last month was the annual Maritime Scholarship Dinner. I didn't think much about inviting Ashley until the invitations were already printed. I added her name without expectation. She came quietly, sat near the back, and listened. She didn't try to speak to me. She didn't ask for recognition. That restraint mattered more than words would have. During my speech, I talked about second chances as systems, not gifts. About consistency. About humility. About effort over time. I didn't look at her when I said those things, but I knew she heard them. Afterward, she wrote a check for $500. I learned about it later from Stephen. She didn't mention it. I didn't acknowledge it. I placed the check in my desk drawer and left it there. I haven't decided what it represents yet. Every few months I visit Sarah's grave. It's a small cemetery outside Crescent Harbor, quiet and shaded. I bring flowers. I sit. I talk. Mostly I listen. I tell her what's happening. I tell her I don't know if I'm doing this right. I tell her I'm trying not to confuse punishment with boundaries. I tell her I'm still learning how to live without her guidance. Standing there reminds me that certainty is overrated. Responsibility isn't. For a long time, revenge felt like fuel. It kept me moving when I had nothing else. I don't pretend otherwise. But revenge burns fast, and it leaves nothing stable behind. What replaced it wasn't forgiveness. It was structure. Structure is what saved me. Structure is what I trust now. Ashley and Connor don't work for me because I'm generous. They work for me because I believe systems can teach lessons emotions cannot. Clear expectations, measured consequences, no shortcuts. I didn't receive a second chance when I needed one. I built one through discipline and time. Offering them a structured opportunity doesn't erase what happened. It simply prevents the past from dictating every future decision. I don't do this for them alone. I do it because I need to live with myself. Some nights I sit on second chance long after the marina quiets down. The name still carries weight. Not because of hope, but because of responsibility. Second chances require maintenance. Neglect them, and they fail like anything else exposed to weather and time. I don't know where this leads. I don't know if effort becomes understanding, or if understanding becomes forgiveness. I'm not chasing reconciliation. I'm protecting stability. If there's one thing survival taught me, it's that standing back up doesn't mean you're ready to trust again. Trust requires proof measured in years, not months. For now, I show up, I work, I keep my word, I keep my distance, and I let time do what it does best, reveal patterns without being forced. I used to believe revenge would fix what was broken. That if I rebuilt my life high enough, far enough, the people who threw me away would finally understand what they lost. I believed success would speak for me when my voice no longer mattered. I believed survival would eventually feel like justice. I was wrong. Survival is only the beginning. It keeps you alive, but it doesn't answer the harder questions. It doesn't tell you who you become after the damage is done. It doesn't decide whether you turn pain into armor or into a weapon. 7.5 years ago, my daughter looked at me across a kitchen table and told me I was worthless. That moment split my life cleanly in two. Everything before, it belonged to a man who believed love meant endurance. Everything after it belonged to a man who learned that endurance without boundaries is just another form of self-destruction. For years, I carried that moment like a verdict. I replayed it in my head during sleepless nights and long drives. I imagined conversations that never happened, apologies that never came, reckonings that never felt complete. I told myself that rebuilding my life was about proving her wrong. It wasn't. It was about learning who I was without needing her to see me. I rebuilt because stopping would have meant disappearing. I worked because idleness would have swallowed me. I learned because ignorance had made me vulnerable once, and I refused to let it happen again. None of it was noble at first. It was survival instinct sharpened into discipline. Somewhere along that road, I crossed a line without realizing it. I stopped asking what she thought. I stopped waiting for her call. I stopped needing her recognition to validate my existence. That was the moment my life actually became mine again. When Ashley and Connor came back into my orbit, it didn't feel like victory. It felt like a test I hadn't studied for. They arrived carrying consequences they didn't understand and expectations they hadn't earned. For the first time, I wasn't the one begging for space. I was the one deciding how close anyone was allowed to stand. That power frightened me more than their rejection ever had. I learned something uncomfortable then. Being wronged doesn't automatically make you righteous. Pain gives you leverage, not wisdom. What you do with it determines everything that follows. I could have crushed them. I could have turned away and watched from a distance as their lives collapsed under the weight of their own choices. No one would have blamed me. Many would have applauded. It would have felt clean, final, satisfying in the short term. It also would have turned me into a man my wife would not have recognized. So I chose something harder. I chose boundaries without cruelty, consequences without vengeance, structure instead of punishment. Not because they deserved it, but because I did. Ashley and Connor work for me now. Not because they are family, not because I forgave them, not because I forgot what they did. They work for me because I understand what it means to stand at the bottom with nothing but pride and fear to keep you upright. I did not give them a gift. I gave them a framework, clear expectations, clear limits, real consequences, no shortcuts, no protection from failure, no promises of reconciliation. That distinction matters. Forgiveness is personal. Employment is transactional. I refuse to confuse the two. People often misunderstand that choice. They think compassion means erasing the past. They think grace requires forgetting. It doesn't. Real grace remembers everything and still chooses restraint. I don't owe my daughter forgiveness. I don't owe her access to my heart. I don't owe her the version of myself that existed before she broke something sacred between us. That man is gone, and he is not coming back. What I owe myself is honesty. Honesty about the damage. Honesty about the limits of repair. Honesty about what I can live with when the noise fades and I'm alone with my own thoughts. I rebuilt my life piece by piece because no one was coming to save me. Along the way, I learned that rebuilding doesn't restore what was lost. It creates something new, different, sometimes smaller, sometimes stronger, almost always lonelier. There are days I still feel the absence sharply. Not of my daughter as she is now, but of the child she used to be. The one who believed her father was safe. The one who didn't measure love in leverage or utility. I grieve that version of her quietly, without expectation that it will ever return. That grief is permanent. I've accepted that. Acceptance doesn't mean approval. It means acknowledging reality without fighting it. People ask me if I'm happy. I don't answer the way they expect. Happiness is unpredictable and loud and temporary. I no longer measure my life by it. I measure it by peace. Peace is waking up without resentment twisting in your chest. Peace is doing work that matters and sleeping without wishing harm on anyone else. Peace is knowing that your worth does not depend on who stayed or who left. I have peace. I have a life I built from the ground up, not to impress anyone, but to survive with dignity. I have friendships forged through loyalty, not obligation. I have purpose that doesn't require applause. I have quiet mornings and honest evenings. That is enough. As for Ashley and Connor, their future is theirs now. They show up. They work. They live with the consequences of who they were and the effort required to become something else. Whether that effort leads to change is not mine to decide. I no longer monitor them as a judge or a savior. I watch as a man who understands that redemption, if it exists at all, must be earned privately before it is ever recognized publicly. My wife believed people could change. I believe people can choose to try. The difference matters. Standing at the end of this story, I see it clearly now. This was never about revenge. It was never about winning. It was about refusing to let betrayal define the rest of my life. I was thrown away once. I will not spend the rest of my years trying to prove that decision wrong. I will spend them living well enough that it becomes irrelevant. That is the real ending of this story. Not reconciliation, not forgiveness, not triumph. Freedom. Freedom from needing answers I will never get. Freedom from chasing apologies that may never come. Freedom from becoming bitter in order to feel justified. I did not rebuild my life so my daughter would come running back. I rebuilt it so that if she never did, I would still stand whole. And I do. This is where my story ends. Not with closure, but with clarity. Not with reunion, but with resolve. Not with vengeance, but with boundaries strong enough to hold compassion without surrendering self-respect. That is the second chance I gave myself. And this time I intend to keep it. So that's my family story, all 7.5 years of it, from the night my daughter threw me out, to the evening I stood on that dock watching the sun set behind a boat I never thought I'd own. People hear it, and they want a neat ending. They want me to say we're all fine now that love conquers all, that forgiveness fixes everything. But I can't give them that, because that's not how life works. Here's what I can tell you. Dad revenge is a trap. When your own children turn on you when they take everything and tell you you're worthless, the anger feels justified. It feels right. And for a while I fed that anger. I let it keep me warm when I had nothing else. But here's the thing, it wasn't warmth. It was ice. And it was freezing me from the inside out. If you're going through something like this, don't be like me. Don't wait 7 years to realize that holding on to bitterness doesn't hurt them, it destroys you. I'm not saying forgive people who don't deserve it. I'm saying release the weight so you can move forward. There's a difference. God knows I struggled with that difference every single day. I'm a man of faith, and I prayed a lot during those years. I asked God why this happened, why my own child could be so cruel, why a family story that should have been about love turned into a war. And you know what I learned? Sometimes God doesn't give you answers. Sometimes He just gives you the strength to take the next step, and then the next one, and then the next. That's what grace is, not a lightning bolt, but a quiet whisper that says, keep going. The world tells you dad revenge is sweet, that making them pay will make you whole. But it won't. I almost lost myself chasing dad revenge before I realized the sweetest victory isn't revenge at all. It's rebuilding your life so well that their opinion of you becomes irrelevant. The real power is in boundaries. In saying, I won't let you destroy me, but I also won't become a monster trying to destroy you back. The real power is in building something new. A boat, a business, a life when everyone said you had nothing left. I don't know if Ashley and I will ever be a real family again. Maybe we will. Maybe we won't. But I know this, I gave her a second chance because I needed one too. Not from her, from myself. And that's between me and God. He's the only one who knows if I did the right thing. So here's my advice, protect yourself, set boundaries, and don't let anyone make you believe you're worthless. But also don't let hatred eat you alive. You're allowed to walk away. You're allowed to grieve. And you're allowed to rebuild without permission. That's my family story. That's my life. Take from it what you will. If this resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Drop a comment below and tell me what you'd do in my position. If you found value in this story, please share it with someone who might need to hear it and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what comes next. Thank you for staying with me until the end. One last note. The stories you'll hear on this channel moving forward may contain fictionalized elements crafted for educational and reflective purposes. If that's not what you're looking for, feel free to explore other content that better suits your preferences. I appreciate your understanding.